lunchtime on October the 9th on the West Coast. It's a historic moment, certainly for Keith and I and for anyone else listening. This is the first non-Keen On show to appear on Now TV. Keith, with a bribe of several $1 million, has been convinced to bring his blockbuster show, That Was the Week, over to the Now TV platform, and I'm thrilled to have him on board. Keith, That Was the Week is a show about the previous week, particularly in tech and venture community. This week, you focus very much on antitrust, your excellent newsletter. Anyone watching should subscribe to Keith's newsletter. Don't trust antitrust. And let me look more carefully at this image that you lead your newsletter, how the Democrats can lose Silicon Valley in their sense. Why the picture, Keith? These four guys up a mountain trying to help someone else. What's the visual element here of antitrust, and your warning against the Democrats to focus too much on antitrust?
Well, there'd be many ways to interpret it, wouldn't there, Andrew? But my interpretation is the three people holding hands are Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and Nancy Pelosi. And they're offering a hand of help to poor little startup, offering to compete with Google, Amazon, Apple, and Facebook, who they consider to be monopolies. So this is the good news story of the Democrats helping the little guy defeat the big bad wolf of Silicon Valley.
And Keith, this argument was triggered by, of course, the headline of the week, which is about the House Democrats calling for the breakup of big tech. So this is not some abstract argument you're making. The issue of antitrust and the Democrats' assault in some people's mind on Silicon Valley now is very real. Let's drill down a little bit in terms of your argument. Your newsletter this week makes a very interesting argument about the dangers of antitrust. I'm quoting you here. You say the future of humanity depends on technology that will be capable of automating much that is currently manual. The ability to reduce the price of food, drinks, housing, clothing, transport, energy, and much more to zero is technology and automation driven. Automation is the reduction of human labor in producing the needs of humanity, animals, and the earth. Ultimately, human labor will be reduced to as close to zero as is achievable. When that happens, choice in how to spend time will become available to all. And I'm capitalizing this, my stress. Large technology companies are part of the path to that possibility. The end of the private company as a requirement of progress can then become possible, and surplus will become social, not individual. Until that time, let's support the ability of capital and know-how to help us get there. So what you're saying, Keith, is that the stakes on this antitrust debate are very high. They're not just about Silicon Valley, they're about the future of humanity.
Well, that's kind of always been true ever since the Industrial Revolution, right? I mean, we all understand that progress comes from innovation, and progress is measured by human freedom, basically. The freedom to choose how to spend your time and not be a slave to work is driven by progress. So the sad thing, in a week where Donald Trump's election campaign not just fell off the rails, but left blood on the tracks, is that the Democrats, who are likely to win, probably by a landslide, don't seem to have a vision for what technology is good for. They only seem to have a vision for what technology is bad for. And that seems really sad, because it means the next 4 years is going to be a missed opportunity to transform our future. They'll spend 4 years trying to knock down what's there rather than leverage it to build something. And, you know, as a person who was very politically active myself for decades, it tempts me to want to be in politics, frankly. Who represents progress these days and the future?
Who indeed? So the tech press, of course, this week has been ablaze with arguments for and against antitrust. One of your favorite sites, I know, is
Stratechery.
Stratechery. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Stratechery.
Stratechery, but it's one of the most read sites, blogs in Silicon Valley. What is Stratechery saying this week about the arguments against antitrust?
Actually, Ben Thompson, who publishes it, wrote two very strong pieces. The one you're showing, and then another one that started with the title Facebook, the Missing Monopoly. And in both cases, he's stressing that if you look rigorously at what Facebook is and what market it dominates, the answer is none. The answer is it doesn't dominate any market. It certainly doesn't dominate advertising, where Google is a major player and Facebook is a strong competitor. It definitely doesn't monopolize social media, where Twitter is a strong player, of course, and others. None of them dominate video, where YouTube is a strong player, but they are too. So the idea that there is a monopoly here is what is the core of Ben Thompson's argument. I agree with him. There are big companies with large audiences with enormous revenues, none of which actually are monopolies.
Since you put the newsletter out, our old friend Mike Arrington put out a tweet saying that people confuse radicals and liberals in Silicon Valley. Is there a split now? Do you think, in Silicon Valley between liberals and radicals on this issue of antitrust and the role of big tech companies?
I think there might be an emerging split, but it certainly is buried if there is one. Most people in Silicon Valley characterize themselves, when it comes to the economy, as libertarian. That is to say, they're in favor of government hands off and just let the market figure it out. And that's the best way. Keep out of the way and just let progress take its course. And Mike definitely has historically been one of those. Mike and I disagree about many things, but we agree about that. And I think that Silicon Valley doesn't really have liberals in the Washington, D.C. meaning of the term for that reason. Now, that said, the Silicon Valley libertarians do, many of them, vote Democrat because they believe in social equality. And it seems to me the missing intellectual piece of the jigsaw puzzle is the relationship between technical innovation and social equality and social opportunity. If you want to solve the problems that Black Lives Matter focuses on, or indeed almost any issue, the precondition for solving it is ending the squabble over resources. And the squabble over resources is only solvable with technology.
Well, that is, of course, according to you, one of the nice things about having, shall we call you, a libertarian Hegelian on the show. I think you're the only libertarian Hegelian in Silicon Valley, is that you're open to other people's opinions. And that was the week newsletter also covered a very different position from an interesting French-American entrepreneur on the East Coast, Maëlle Gavet. I don't know if I've done her justice. What's next for Silicon Valley? And she takes, Keith, an entirely different position from you. Let me quote Maëlle. She says, the near total, and I misspelled dominance, the near total dominance of the top tech giants, Facebook, Amazon, Alphabet, Apple, and Microsoft, has become stifling. This is an argument that is very much covered in her new book as well, Trampled by Unicorns. These companies don't hoover up talent, but have grown to such a size and expanded into adjacent markets to such an extent that they are starving all but the best new tech businesses of oxygen. Smaller companies who compete in one of the markets that big tech considers as strategic, an ever-expanding list, risk becoming a target of full financial power of one of the giants, who aim to crush or buy possible contenders before they grow beyond a certain size. And I'm capitalizing her here because I think it's here that she gets in your face from your libertarian point of view. She says, this hegemony impacts innovation and centralizes capital allocation. This was from a piece Mail wrote in the Harvard Business Review last week, which you recommend in your newsletter. Both Mail and you are talking about innovation. She takes an entirely different position. How would you respond to her argument?
The reason I published it, Andrew, is I think it's an excellent piece. And you may think it's a contradiction for me to say so, but I actually agree with her, whilst at the same time agreeing with my own point of view. Why? Because it's actually a fairly complex discussion that isn't really well served by a David and Goliath framing. Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, and Alphabet are at the same time massive innovators, whilst at the same time stifling innovation. They do both things. The argument about how they help innovation is obvious, so I won't make it. How do they stifle it? They stifle it because it's in their self-interest to acquire talent and to own future markets. So when Facebook acquired Instagram and WhatsApp, it was doing both things, acquiring talent and future markets. When it acquired Giphy recently, it was doing both things. Now, my point of view is there is nothing illegal about it doing those things. Nothing at all.
We've had this argument, Keith, before. It's about the issue of antitrust is not whether or not monopolies are illegal. It's whether or not businesses which have very strong control of one market use that strength to illegally control other markets. What I don't understand in terms of your argument is that if you listen to people like Scott Galloway or Mail, Gavet, I mean, splitting up Amazon into Amazon Web Services and a store, or splitting up Facebook between Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp, they maintain their strength. If anything, Scott Galloway argues that actually builds shareholder value. So what I don't understand is your dark dystopian view is if you break these companies up, it ends Silicon Valley, it ends their strength, it ends innovation. Because
no, it's really...
look at the history of AT&T. They got split up, and you got a series of companies that were, if anything, more innovative than the original monopoly.
It's easy for me to explain it, Andrew. By the way, Andrew, you're showing a graphic now, not us. I don't know if you intended that, but just in case you didn't. It's easy to explain it, Andrew. It comes down to who would you trust more with the future of Facebook's shareholder value, Facebook or the government? And I don't trust the government to make good decisions for Facebook shareholders. I just don't. I mean,
well, it's not the government. I mean, the government's listening, and I've had a series of people on my show on Keen On talking about breaking these companies up. The people in the government are now being advised by highly sophisticated tech people who will argue that you need to break, say, Facebook into 3 companies: Instagram, WhatsApp, and Facebook. What's wrong with that?
We're all familiar with that, but it's basically fascism. You can't. What's
fascist about that?
It's the people who support that are basically, for me, the same as the QAnon people. They start with a conspiracy theory that Facebook is bad and doing bad things. They try to influence policy in favor of their conspiracy theory. There's no substance in their theory. And then they try to recruit the government because it's powerful as their supporter.
But Mail is doing that. She's not QAnon. I mean, there's perfectly reasonable people who want to break these companies up, including myself.
She doesn't argue for breaking it up there, by the way.
Well, she argues, I think, implicitly that
look, I'm an investor in a company called Infarm, which is going to be worth billions of dollars. And nothing Facebook, Google, Apple, or the others do will stop it, because innovation still works. But a smart innovator doesn't drive towards an area that a big company wants and can own. So innovation isn't being stifled. Innovation in space is they care about is being stifled, but they have blind spots left and right that innovators can head for. Now TV, your project, can be successful despite the existence of these companies because these companies aren't building Now TV, you are. And nothing, they might come and offer you a pound of flesh if it gets big, and you'll have a choice to make whether to take it. That's a choice. They can't force you to sell to them. So it really is a conspiracy theory of the big bad wolf versus the good guys. And it's wrong. The good guys are not the people arguing for breakup. They are actually small-minded, anti-innovation zealots.
Including myself. This is the conversation that will go on and on in That Was the Week. It's certainly only the beginning, and hopefully, and I hope, Keith, you're on my side here, we will have a change of administration in November or January, and then these things will become real. Let's focus on your innovator, your company, your startup of the week. Uncork. What are they all about? They seem to be an interesting new play. I hadn't heard of them before you mentioned them in your newsletter.
Yeah, Uncork is in a space known as no code. No code is where you can manipulate content and data in very complex ways, close to a machine learning style of manipulation of data with outputs that you wouldn't be able to easily find, and you can do it without writing code. And there's a lot of companies in this space. Airtable is a unicorn in this space. Actually, Snowflake, which went public recently and is trading at huge valuations, is in this space. So Uncork is for people who have lots of data to understand and want to use a service, a cloud-based service, to understand the meanings inside that data, but don't want to have to be an engineer and write code. It's a growing space, which you could think of as business automation of various kinds. Another big player in that space is UiPath, which is worth about $10 billion now. There's lots and lots of companies in the space, and I like it as much as I like all the others because it points to a future, Andrew, where you and me, who didn't learn to code, can do interesting things without employing an engineer.
Yeah, I guess, and it's hard to speak for the dead, but this would warm the heart, warm the heart of Steve Jobs. And your thought of the week, I think it's thought of the week or post of the week, is about Steve Jobs. You're quoting him here. I think it's been 6 years, as our friend O'Malley reminded us, 6 years since Jobs died. But his sayings, if anything, have even more relevance. So here's the quote you give from Jobs for this week to remind us of his brilliance. Innovation comes from people meeting up in the hallways or calling each other at 10:30 at night with a new idea, or because they realize something that shoots holes in how we've been thinking about a problem. Would Jobs love this new code wave of companies?
Jobs always liked anything that made human effort easier. So yes, he absolutely would love it. It's not that he doesn't believe in technology and coding. He absolutely did as well. But anything which removes effort so that you can get the outcome you want with less effort is something he would have been in favor of. It's basically the core of humanism. Humanism is about freeing people from effort.
Actually, it was 9 years ago. Sorry, not 6 years ago, as Owen reminds us, on October the 6th.
Interesting enough, his quote, yesterday I spent all my afternoon with two innovators talking about what replaces the World Wide Web. And these innovators have just an unbelievable idea about the canvas we will all publish on in the future, and argue that it isn't going to be a web page. They've figured out the next canvas, if you like, and the company is called New Canvas.
Well, let's save that for next week, because that sounds like a half an hour discussion. Facebook, of course, is always in the news, back in the news in terms of new policies on how they're going to deal with the election and all sorts of controversies around Facebook. Your tweet of the week is from Dan Rose, a longtime Facebook VP. What's the tweet of the week, Keith?
Well, so Dan retired from Facebook a couple of years ago now, and moved to Hawaii. I think he might be back here now running a venture fund. So he recounts in 2008 when Facebook had, I can't remember how many users. It was something like 80 million, was it? 80 million users, that's right.
In 2008, Facebook's user growth hit a wall at 80 million. And
80
we were
million.
having serious debate about whether any social network could ever reach 100 million users.
Right.
2 years later, we had doubled our user base, and not long after that, we reached 1 billion users. Here's how we did it. So it's this series of tweets.
Yeah. So he's basically talking about how they thought they'd reached the peak, and of course now they're at 2.7 billion users. And so it's a real insider view of blocking and tackling actual problems of growing a startup business. And and even at 80 million, you think you're finished, and yet there's still so much more that you can do. So it's about resilience, focus, teamwork. It's a really good thread. It's not just one tweet; it's a whole thread of tweets.
And then coming back to Jobs' point about innovation, do you see Facebook as a major innovator, or have they hit a wall in that sense?
Their innovation has changed. They were a macro innovator, as in they were redefining an entire human behavior. Now they're more of a micro innovator, adding features to an existing platform. And most likely they'll get disrupted by whoever figures out what the next canvas is.
Let's go back to end. Let's go back to your wonderful vision, heroic vision of the future of technology. Just remind us who that fifth character is on that rock. Is it all of us, Keith?
The one to the left, you mean, or the one to the right?
To my right, the person who
is being helped up.
Who is waiting to be helped up.
Yeah, that's you, Andrew. That's now.tv, that's New Canvas, and that's any startup that has aspirations to change the world.
And basically, it's about bringing the price of everything down to zero.
Well, nothing will ever become zero, but it will all tend towards zero as the price of making it becomes zero.
And you still remain optimistic, Keith, that we can get down to that zero without new tyrannies of monopolies controlling our lives, creating surveillance capitalism and all the other infrastructure that people fear in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, your optimism comes from the same place as the optimism that Nelson Mandela being put in prison wouldn't stop the anti-apartheid movement. Human beings don't give up. Human beings are fantastic at creating what comes next, and never, ever constrained by what stands in their way. It's a wonderful thing, humanity. So I have to be optimistic. Otherwise, I'd have to despair about humans.
Well, that was the week with the most resilient Hegelian libertarian in Silicon Valley, Keith Teare. We will be back again next week to discuss much more about antitrust, tweets of the week, innovators of the week, and the rest of the news out of Silicon Valley. Have a great week, Keith. I'll see you next week.
Thank you.